When people hear Venezuela, they think of economic collapse, empty shelves, mass migration. And when they hear United States, they think sanctions, democracy, human rights. But what's unfolding between these two nations isn't just about politics. It isn't just about moral debates or diplomatic rhetoric. Beneath the headlines and soundbites lies something far more consequential: control, oil, power. This is not a story about war in the old sense. No invading armies crossing borders. This is a story about how modern geopolitical power is exerted today, quietly, strategically, and ruthlessly. It all came to a head in January 2026 with an event that shocked the world. The United States captured the sitting president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, and brought him to U.S. soil to face charges. This is the real story of what's happening between the U.S. and Venezuela, beyond the surface. Why Venezuela matters. To understand why this all matters, you need to understand one simple fact. Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on Earth. Larger than Saudi Arabia. Larger than Russia. This isn't speculative potential. This is proven oil waiting beneath the ground. For decades, Venezuelan oil fed global markets, including the United States. Refineries were designed around its heavy crude. That's why, when Venezuela began to nationalize its oil sector and resist foreign influence, it became a geopolitical focal point. This wasn't just economic policy. It was a challenge to the global energy order. Suddenly, Venezuela wasn't just a supplier of oil. It became a thorn in the side of the world's dominant power. The quiet weapon. Most people imagine war as tanks, missiles, and soldiers. But modern power often operates through something subtler. Sanctions. For years, the U.S. imposed broad sanctions on Venezuelan oil exports, financial institutions, state-owned companies, access to global banking. Officially, these measures were framed as efforts to restore democracy. But in practice, sanctions did something far more disruptive. They choked the Venezuelan economy. They made normal trade impossible. They made life harder for ordinary people. And they pushed political power into the shadows. When oil can't be exported normally, it finds unofficial routes. When banking is restricted, money flows through informal networks. This is how sanctions reshape not just economies, but entire power structures. The capture of Maduro, a radical escalation. This brings us to the most dramatic moment in the story. The capture of Nicolas Maduro in January 2026. Unlike past sanctions or diplomatic pressure, this was a military operation, one that included airstrikes on Venezuelan territory and a coordinated extraction of Venezuela's president and his wife. The U.S. administration presented the operation as a law enforcement action. Maduro had been indicted in the U.S. on drug trafficking and narco-terrorism charges. But no matter how it was framed, the capture of a foreign head of state by another nation's military is historically unprecedented in modern diplomacy. It instantly raised questions about sovereignty, international law, and regional stability. This wasn't a proxy fight. It wasn't economic pressure. It was a direct military intervention. For the first time in decades, the world watched the U.S. forcibly remove and transport a sitting president from his own country. The legal and moral debate. Was what the U.S. did legal? The answer isn't simple. On one hand, U.S. officials argue they acted within their constitutional authority, citing indictments and national security concerns. But many international legal experts say the action violated the UN Charter and long-standing norms against using force without Security Council authorization. UN member states from Russia to China to several Latin American nations condemned the operation, calling it a violation of sovereignty and international law. Even some Western allies raised concerns about the precedent it sets, that a powerful nation might justify violating another country's borders under the guise of law enforcement. This isn't just a legal argument. It's a philosophical one. Can one nation unilaterally dictate justice on a global scale? When does national security become imperial overreach? What this means for leadership in Venezuela. With Maduro removed and in U.S. custody, power didn't disappear. Instead, Vice President Delcy Rodriguez assumed the role of acting president under Venezuelan law. Rodriguez began releasing some political prisoners, a gesture framed as a new political moment, though human rights groups say many remain detained. The U.S., meanwhile, signaled support for a transition of power and began negotiating with interim authorities over oil exports and economic policy. This moment is crucial. Leadership in Venezuela is not just about governing. It's about navigating the aftermath of a foreign military intervention, massive economic pressure, and divided public opinion. Why the U.S. didn't need a full invasion. An outright invasion, with ground troops, would be costly, controversial, and globally condemned. Instead, the U.S. chose what analysts call surgical intervention. Limited strikes, targeted extraction, control over critical resources. This approach allows the U.S. to pursue its objectives without sustaining mass casualties or sustaining long-term occupation. It's power without tanks, influence without boots on the ground. The oil game no one talks about. Even amidst sanctions and military pressure, Venezuelan oil hasn't disappeared from global markets. It's just redirected, rebranded, or sold through intermediaries. Now, with the U.S. asserting control over oil contracts and planning sales, including a reported $500 million sale of Venezuelan oil, the stakes have shifted. Oil still matters, maybe more than ever. Control over Venezuela's energy resources means leverage over global energy prices, regional economic stability, long-term geopolitical influence. This is where the battle really is. Who pays the price? It's not superpowers. It's not oil traders. It's ordinary people. The Venezuelan currency has plummeted. Inflation is surging. Basic goods are scarce. Economic hardship becomes a bargaining chip, not an accident. When suffering becomes leverage, it stops being collateral damage. It becomes part of strategy. Beyond Venezuela, a global pattern. This isn't unique. We've seen similar playbooks in places like Iran, Cuba, Iraq, and beyond. Different contexts. Same underlying logic. Economic pressure, political isolation, strategic intervention, control of key resources. Power today isn't about occupying land. It's about controlling currency, trade, legitimacy, narrative. And that's where the real battles are fought, beyond the surface. So no, this isn't a conventional war with tanks and borders. It's something more subtle and more consequential. Because when the world's most powerful nation captures the leader of another sovereign state, and then asserts temporary control over its governance and resources, that's not just geopolitics. That's a new chapter in how power operates in the 21st century. Welcome to modern conflict. Welcome to the war that isn't obvious, but is shaping our world nonetheless. If you want more videos that go beyond headlines and break down what's really happening beneath the surface, consider subscribing. Leave a like so that this kind of content reaches more people. I'll see you in the next one.